When you see someone that's very successful and you wish you were as successful, you can do one of two things. You can uh, ask what made them so successful so that I can learn from them and become successful myself. You can go over to them directly and ask them. Or you can tear them down by saying they're crooks, they're cheats, and that's how they became successful. I would never do that. So it's always this idea of whether I raise myself up or I bring the other person down. And this becomes a way of life that people have of either raising themselves up. And you can see certain people, they live a life of always constantly improving. And then you have other people who are constantly the victim and complaining about everyone else being frauds. And this is exactly what happens with the Jewish people. The anti-Semite brings down the Jews. They say, oh, they're successful or whatever it may be because there's always a sinister, like, like the whole idea with Israel is that there's some type of a sinister thing that Israel are aggressors. They're they're brutal people. They have to dominate. Completely untrue. But instead of putting responsibility where it belongs, they don't, because their whole model of and worldview is bring down the person who is more successful than you instead of asking yourself how I can rise up. This is a great conversation where they really acknowledge that this is true. That the Jewish people are successful, and we should be learning from them. We shouldn't be tearing them down.
This is what I think. If I had to simplify this entire thing, is because of the scriptures, which to me is actually just a testament that the scriptures are true. Because of the scriptures, because of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, a framing of financial literacy and success, and these things being true, and Jewish people holding to these principles throughout thousands of years, now you have them, which is a small population of the global world population, but because culturally, this is the difference between like head knowledge, tacit knowledge on an individual level, and like building culture. Because of culturally implementing God's ways for certain things, you always see Jewish people in positions of influence, success, and power. Whether that's Hollywood, whether that's law, whether that's whatever. And so people think it's a conspiracy and they've all joined together. It's like, no, you don't understand that like they couldn't do anything else. And so they went into these other industries, like entertainment, banking, law, and like crushed and dominated because of the principles that we see in Proverbs.
Come on.
Right? And that's a cultural dynamic that many who don't understand. Right? Shout out to Javier. He says, Jews don't pray for money, they pray for work. Better mindset, they have winning mindsets.
That's a bar.
So why do you see Jewish people always successful and always in positions of power? Again, it's a very much an oversimplification.
Don't pray for money, pray for work.
Yeah, pray for work. Pray for, well, what is work? Solving problems.
Come on.
Pray for work to solve problems, right? And
since when has interest been a solution?
Right. They own the most expensive parts of Brooklyn. That's the power of culture. And I think what happens is, especially in pockets of the right, is that folks don't understand a better story. They're just consumed with being outraged against something.
Yeah.
And if all you are is just outraged about everything, you actually never build culture. You just have outraged culture.
Come on.
And so you're just mad. You're mad about everything. Yeah. Instead of saying, hey, how do we make it so here's a simple example. The dollar staying within your community.
That's a good one.
Right? So again, I don't want to use hypergeneralization, but like Jewish people have a way to maintain their dollar to stay within their own communities.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like if your dollar stays within your community, that means your community will always prosper. If you're always prioritizing doing business and commerce with people who are aligned towards your culture and your worldview, guess what? There'll always be a circulation of money within there.
I'm gonna start that embroidery business.
And wait, what? No, that's like a practical sense. Like I'm gonna go to the Christian mechanic. I'm gonna go to the Christian business owner. I'm gonna go to people who share my values.
A buddy that starts a screen printing business.
Right. I'm gonna go to my buddy who has a silk screen business. So when you do that, you keep the dollar within the circulation of your own community versus you just spend money frivolously to pagans and people who don't care about you, your community, or your God.
Yuck.
And then you actually lose power that way, right? Yep. And again, these are all things that I just don't think folks care to understand. And so then when you see a group successful, you go, well, we're not successful like that. Therefore, they must be bad and they must have a. It's like, no, you should look out for your own. Like you should look out for your own. Yep. And so it's like, I think oftentimes Christians have a very toxic view about finances. They have a toxic view about success. They have a toxic view of business. And then they all wonder why we don't have the same circulation and resources and stability that other communities do. So when you don't understand that it's a cultural issue,
Yep.
then you look at successful cultures and you demonize and you blame them. And that's, I think in a nutshell, a very hyper-generalized, simplified version of, I think, why this is happening specifically with Israel.
This is excellent. Wow, I'm very impressed with these guys, and it's so true. And the example he uses about, for example, keeping the money in the family, right? In other words, when a Jew can travel anywhere in the world, and when they walk over to another Jew, they are walking over to a family member who will help them if they really need help. That's the power of family, and every single culture should be doing that. We have responsibility to our family before our responsibility to a stranger. And so there's the blood family, but then there is the spiritual family. And, there's a Jewish family, and there is a Christian family, Islamic family. I mean, there are many different types of families. There are also community families. And that's the way people should be conducting themselves. But instead, what they do is they point fingers and they accuse, and that's exactly, in part, what's going on with Israel. Israel is a super, super successful country, and the Arabs, the hate the Arabs have is just endless. They're doing nothing to build up their countries, or very, very little, and they're doing everything to tear down Israel.